All right. We are live on the Systematic Selling Podcast. We have Jackie Hirsch with Crown Atlantic Business Brokers. Welcome to our time together. I always love jamming with you, Jackie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sean. It's always fun to talk about how people can maximize their business value and give them tips and tricks. Why not? To make the world a better place. If they make more money, everybody prospers.
Absolutely. And Jackie, the key topic that we're going to be talking about today is building a sales team that makes your business more valuable. And that is right in your wheelhouse. So if you could just share with us what you guys do at Crown Atlantic, your ideal seller profile, the types of companies that you enjoy working with, just to give us all a taste of what you do.
We work with typically industrial companies, sometimes other unique companies. Typically sizes are 750,000 EBITDA to 10 million in EBITDA. Yeah. And we see this scenario all the time, which is why I mentioned it to you and reached out saying, sometimes the seller, the owner, is very deep in the sales process and does not allow the team to assist or really take over that function. And it creates a value risk for the seller in selling the company. And it also creates a risk for the buyer who's worried about, will those relationships transfer with a new owner?
Yeah. And what I want to do is double click on the seller side, but then also talk about the buyer side as they're walking in and evaluating companies. But on the seller side, from your perspective, what holds these founders back from letting go of the reins with their sales teams?
What holds most sellers back, in my opinion, and this is pretty much in every department of their company, is I think that most business owners and most people have never been taught how to delegate a task properly, and then also create a system for them to delegate the task. And so often I feel like business coaches, like, oh, the seller is a complete control freak. I don't feel like that's the case. The seller does not know how to, A, clearly communicate, which should be a college course and probably a high school and middle school course, and B, create a system that deduces how to explain the sales function in their company. And then you need to break it down, of course, with outbound sales and inbound sales, right? There are three things, business owners need. They need a CRM that's really robust. Then they need to have own the contact number and the contacts that come into the CRM. They must control that. And then 3, they have to have processes that they can delegate to the team for the team to understand how to do the either inbound sales function or outbound sales function.
There's some things I want to go deeper on, but before I do, when you talk about just delegation in general, how do you help in the founder's mind? What are some recommendations of how they can overcome certain limiting beliefs in how they do it? And then from a tactical perspective, what can they do to be better communicators through that delegation process?
Well, first, I think a lot of times the reason why the owners do not let the team sell is they are worried about the risk of having them in contact with the customer and that they would
the brand risk.
Steal the customer. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's a brand risk. And is that person trained enough? Well, this is what I think is brilliant about what you do, right? Is taking a tradesperson often and making them a salesperson. Because if they have the knowledge, a lot of times they can be a super effective salesperson, better than a salesperson that's trained with no technical knowledge.
Exactly.
But not all people who are great at a trade would be great at sales. It really does take a certain type of niche of person. When the owner is trying to figure out if they can delegate this function, again, they haven't put the tools in place for themselves. Again, this is where the CRM comes in, or some sort of tracking mechanism that owns all of the data. What happens if you go on vacation and you have a customer call in, and then one of your team gets that call? They should have a place where they can make notes of what happened in that call so that it's all in one place. And then that app runs on their phones so that it can be transferred to them. And again, you're mitigating some of your risk as a company. And that's how you have to build it in steps. But a lot of owners just don't even want to take that first step in any of these systems because it's not easy. So again, it's about taking a risk, taking the time to build the tech, which hurts and is painful, but worth it.
It is.
And then from there, training the team.
When the way we look at sales organizations in the SMB market, we look at 3 phases at systematic selling. You've got founder-led, where it's the founder being the primary rainmaker for the company. You've got founder-managed, where the founder has brought on a sales team, but the founder's still largely a player coach or working in that VP of sales role. And then the third phase, which I imagine is the holy grail when you look at if you could achieve this as a seller, is a professionalized sales team. It's a self-sustaining sales team. It's got a sales leader. It's got a sales team with sales systems in place and inside sales, outbound sales, everything, the division of labor within that team. And so that's how we see that progression. I work with a client right now that we've worked with for several years. And at the time I started working with him, he was founder led and then now has a professionalized sales team. But the biggest barrier, and I'm hoping you can speak to this, the biggest barrier early on was the fear of bringing on a sales team that would then steal customers. Like, that was the biggest obstacle that we had to work. Oh, he's going to have access to this customer information, this and that. And so I'm curious how you've seen it and how you've talked folks through and advised them through that aspect.
It is a real risk. It's not that the risk isn't there. And that's why you have to mitigate the risk by putting tools in place. You can also, have paperwork involved. Sometimes non-competes don't work anymore, but non-circumvent or you're not allowed to work with this client any client that's ever been introduced to you from this company. So there are methods around it. And then choosing people with integrity is
huge.
Imperative. And the other thing is when owners pay their team well, I feel like that mitigates a little bit of risk. There was a company I saw recently and every single person was being underpaid. Now, from an employee perspective, it's hard to find a job. It's hard to find a good job that's consistent, that you know what you're supposed to be doing. And, people, I think, don't want to hop around. Sometimes they do to get more money, but I don't think that that's their goal. Their goal is consistency. And if you're not giving your staff a path and a way to make more money, then they are going to look for other opportunities, especially if they're being paid under market. And you as a business owner should understand if that's there. And you should also understand what their goals are. Consistency. Do they want incentives to make more money? Because often you can run a smaller team that makes more money if you give really good incentives. Some people can work 50 hours a week and they don't mind. And some people really can't work more than 30 hours a week. That's kind of where they're at with life and managing their family and everything else. So if you understand that, it makes a big difference. I remember there was a roofing company that I worked with one of the owners, and he had a staff member who was phenomenal, super organized, incredibly diligent, did not miss anything, but at 3:00 had to pick up her kid. Now, she would return to the office every day at 3:00. she'd be back by 3:30 with her child,
Yeah.
who would just do his homework in the break room and hang out and was kind of like the office mascot. And then at 5 o'clock, they left. And it
Yeah.
was that allowance of space that this seller gave that allowed him to have this incredible team member. And sometimes a new owner has, or a business owner just has to be open to all the different possibilities to make the lives of their staffs better. Is that lady going anywhere? No. Will she get
Yeah.
that anywhere else? No. And she was paid quite well, but she worked and she was super efficient. He said that he believed that she did the work of 1.5 to 2 people most days.
That's awesome. But giving her the flexibility is what earned her loyalty to
She
be on the
needed a
team.
half hour.
Yeah. If to recap what you just said there, you mentioned 3 things to me that are key in mitigating that risk of, hey, they can just go off and steal our customers. Number 1, you mentioned character. And we are huge on that. It is hire for character, train for success. When it comes to sales, it is not rocket science, right? It's you're not a neurosurgeon. You're not it is people skills. And anybody can learn it. I'm a complete introvert, and I learned how to sell at a high level and sell as a founder from scratch and everything else. The belief is that you can be an elite seller no matter what your actual talents are if you have the desire to master those skills. So hire for character and then train for success. So you look for the folks that have integrity. And, when you're interviewing, you can't necessarily go in and go, hey, do you have integrity? You got to ask situational questions that hey, here's this situation that happened. One of your managers was doing something unethical. How did you handle that situation? Or you had to give a customer bad news. What was your approach to doing it? Those are tactical interview questions that unearth character traits that you're looking for. So character's number 1. The second is compensation package. And I can't tell you, Jackie, the ones that build elite sales teams, it doesn't matter what size of company they are, the ones that build the elite sales team have a very clear, straightforward comp package that is generous and competitive. It doesn't have to be the highest base salary in the world. It just has to really make sense so that each sales rep can run their business within the business without the headaches of overhead. The moment that they can realize that, then they feel comfortable doing it. And then the third, and I didn't intend this, but these are 3 C's that we got here, character, compensation. The third is the culture that you mentioned with that story of creating a culture that values its employees to allow certain levels of flexibility because of how much value that they bring to the company. So those are the 3 things I'm hearing you say, and you all in the audience start double clicking on those things. Are you looking for people with character? Or is your comp package not only competitive, but is it crystal clear? And then third, are you building a culture that not only keeps elite talent, but attracts it because of how desirable that you are? I'll give you a chance to double click on that. Did that accurately capture what you were thinking there, Jackie?
I think the only thing I would add is opportunity. Is there an opportunity for them to build that business? Yes. Are there customers out there, right? You can hire a salespeople. Sometimes business owners are like, all I need is a good salespeople person. Is the opportunity there? So there's a glass. Oh, sorry. Everything just went out blank for a second. Okay. There was a glass business that we sold, and the they do, huge glass structures for, multinational companies. But then they also will fix the glass door in a storefront, right? And they charge like $2,000 for this. And they redo,
Yeah.
that slow mechanism that closes, right? They redo that. They clear out all the dust and debris that get into the door lock so that the door lock doesn't jam. And
Yep.
it's a system that needs to be tuned up just like a car. I had no idea. And if they just did doors, even though it's not as high ticket of an item, I think they could make a fortune. And I've
Yeah.
suggested this many times. Then there was, another company that we sold where they had been doing, pavers for 20 years. Well, Florida is an unstable, place, right? There's
Yeah.
sand and
Yep.
muck and dirt
Yeah.
and wind and rain and more muck. And so those pavers will sink over time. Always. There's
I
always
was about
like
to
a
say we
divot.
got sinkholes.
Yeah. And so you need to lift up the pavers and add more dirt and straighten it out, or
Yeah.
maybe recolor them, maybe,
Yep.
get new pavers, right? And the owners had never reached out to previous jobs. Like they had never done a mail out or an email. And so the new owners,
Yeah.
their whole initial strategy was just reach out to the decades old list of customers. That's it.
Why the heck not? Yeah.
Even if the owner of the home doesn't live there anymore, somebody else lives there, right? So
Yeah.
somebody else needs that same service. And it's been phenomenal for them, even though some of the trades like have declined a bit since COVID. And that
Yeah.
they've done phenomenally well.
Yeah. People really undervalue and underestimate how much gold they have in their CRM that they aren't even touching, of previous customers that they worked with. It's like, wait a minute, they've already spent money with you. They trusted you enough there. Why are you not staying top of mind? Not only because, and I think the reason why people do is they think transactionally. And what we train owners to think and sales teams to think in terms of a funnel, which is a transaction based metaphor, to think in terms of an orbit where they are in your orbit, and then you do things that cultivate trust over time, that create a gravitational pull of trust, that then bring them to ground level where you're able to do business. They're ready to buy, you're ready to sell, and so forth. And so often they have this goal. They're actually in their orbit, but they have this funnel mentality. We already had that transaction. Boom. They don't realize that these customers could be fantastic referral partners because they've already experienced great service. They also don't realize that customers have itch cycles for certain types of services. Like we had our pavers cleaned, sealed, everything else 3 years ago. And the provider, like clockwork, texted my wife and said, "Hey, it's about that time. Is that something you want to do?" Yes, thank you. We had lost his number. So that person reaching out was incredibly valuable. So that is a key that I don't understand why people would do it. And if you are currently doing that, rethink and start leveraging the customers that you've already reached out to.
And that's even for sole proprietors, right? So 6 years ago, I wanted a small console table to be built in our house. It's like a small, like a console table, but I also want it to be a desk, which is like a strange thing. This is like right before COVID. I had this idea. Like, I don't know, just in case somebody ever wanted to sit at that table also and use it as a desk, but it's also a console table in this one room. And so this guy advertised on Craigslist that he builds furniture. And so I reached out to him. I mean, this is like a crazy story. So then he said, "Yeah, I'm a young carpenter. I'm looking for a job. One of my friends owns a huge millwork company that does millwork for massive companies and is always looking for carpenters." So I introduced him to my friend who had a company. So he got a job. So he built this console table on the side. And then later, he moved to Texas. He and his wife moved to Texas, and then they moved back. And they moved back this year. And he texted me. He said, "Hey, Jackie, I remember that you'd wanted to build a bookcase for this one corner of your room. Did you end up doing that?" Okay, because I had asked him about it, but he was going to move to Texas. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And he just finished that bookcase. I'll send you a picture. But, so he reached out, and I mean, we spent $5,500 on this bookcase that he built on the side. And it was, he did it in his garage, and he painted it and came over and measured. He'd already been to our house. But he's like, "Let us know what else you want built." And so Michael and I are walking around the house like, what else could we have him do? And I feel like that's a lot for, a lot of companies. The HVAC company that we've used, they have created different mini splits for us. They redid our ductwork. We then did spray foam insulation. So then we needed some different systems like to make sure that all worked. Then we got a new HVAC. I mean, we've spent, probably 30, 40 grand with them. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
we have a maintenance, contract with them where they come out and they check on our stuff. They also do the same thing for my office. So we have that in place, and we think that system is very important in Florida. And honestly, I learned a lot. As a kid, my parents kept the air at like 82 degrees, maybe higher.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, you just like
my
sweat
wife
it out.
is at more level.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it was like 84. And, wow. They said, you should really keep that system at 76, because then if you consistently keep it the same, then mold doesn't grow, mildew doesn't grow, which, is the state flower in Florida. And so you just, you want to learn about those systems. And if you have a good company, you can learn how to best care for your systems in your home or your office or your facility, right? You want to make sure that the CNC machine manufacturer comes out and has some sort of program to update your system, to care for the system and look at the fittings, right? And so if you're selling those systems, if you're selling those maintenance offerings to your customers, this is a way that your team can reach out. Hey, can we maintain your system? Hey, can we update your system? Because everybody wants their systems to work properly.
You bring up an amazing point about creating opportunity for your sales team. So often you go, well, I'm hiring a sales rep. They should be the ones thinking about this and creating the opportunity. But your business a whole lot better than they do coming in. Maybe they can create ideas because they're coming in from the outside. But create that opportunity. Point that out to them. Take what you're doing that's on a small scale because you're a single individual who is running a business and selling. Take what you're doing there and make that where it can scale with your team. Build like in a commercial HVAC company that you're familiar with, because you did a favor for me with them last year, and I appreciate that. But what I love about their business model is they base it on like a pyramid where they go at the base. These are our maintenance contracts. If we enter in at a higher level on the pyramid where we're doing repairs, always get to the point where you can get them on the maintenance contracts. And then you move into repairs, and you move into, retrofits, and then you're moving into building automation systems. And you're working your way up that pyramid, or you're filling in the gaps in that pyramid. And that is what creates just high value opportunities for the sales teams. So it's thinking through that and having that systematized. It's hugely valuable.
And I know the people that they send because they send the same people, right? Because that's smart to send the same tech team to the customers if they can. And if you have a good CRM, you can track that. And so, they always look at our HVAC kind of this is at the office, in the summer and in the winter, right? It's kind of like, late winter, after summer, they come out and check on everything. And in the winter, usually February can get kind of chilly in Florida. And so I always have like hot tea. I'm like, I got you hot tea, and I have like to-go cups at the office. And, like, because
Yeah.
I know them and I see them over the years.
Yeah. Absolutely. And something that I've been curious about, when you say about having sales teams and having systems that helps in terms of improving the value of the business, about what kind of impact is it? Like, take a founder led that sales business that you're trying to sell versus one that's got a professionalized sales team. What are we talking about in orders of magnitude there of value?
I mean, that could be a huge difference in multiplier, right? So when you're valuing a company, it's often a multiple of the EBITDA, earnings before interest and tax, depreciation, amortization, right? And so it's that bottom line number after paying all the expenses, after paying the owner's salary, like, what is the business making? And if the owner is high level, he gets significantly more for the business. And here's an example. There was a business that I sold where the owner was fairly absentee, but there was really no sales force. And that sold for like a 4x multiple. And then there was another business I sold earlier this year that had a recurring revenue stream. The business just completely every year just ratchets up just a little bit every year. Sold for an 8x.
Yeah.
It's just a huge difference. I think that's a massive difference.
It is. And when I'm looking at that and looking at owners that are in that realm, and you think about not only of the value of the company, but you look at your ability to compete. Meaning, say in the commercial trades, the best accounts are not inbounding you. The best accounts are being called on by sales reps. It requires outbound. If you are the owner doing sales, at best, you're spending about 2 hours a day in sales. And you may be fantastic at sales, but you're competing against folks that are 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day at sales. How do you even think about competing against that? And that frame of reference often is what turns completely opens their mind of, oh crap. We need to do this. So no matter how good they are. Yeah.
It's also maintaining that sales. So sometimes that's why people want older businesses, because the clients have been there for so long. And you mentioned HVAC. Yep. I do know of a company that traded either early this year or late last year at 18x, right? And it was a huge company. And it was because of those maintenance contracts, those deep commercial maintenance contracts where it's almost like company knows those systems so well. They know every system, right? Because their CRM is so good. Every system that's in that facility and what was put in and when it was maintained. And then when that's acquired, the team is it's an elite team with an elite system. And when an owner, again, when somebody's not focused, and they're doing some sales, and then they go in the back and they're working on some of the machinery, and then they talk to some of the people, and it's an unfocused regimen. That is where the business has reduced value. If they're doing the job of 3 people, for somebody to want to acquire that business, they don't feel that they have the capacity to do the repair in the back, also train the sales team, then, maybe mitigate some other issue, right? So, and then also they might be doing their own accounting, right? You have to segment what you're good at and then work on that and then create a path so that when you sell the business in the future, and this is your exit plan, whether you're working on this in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, your exit plan is that somebody else can walk in and take over your role. And if you're fixing stuff and doing sales and every single type of function in the business, it's not going to work. And that's where the value diminishes. And you want to increase value. And that's why you can get rid of the sales function. You can get rid of repair and think about, but you can't get rid of the vision. And if you're the founder, that is your job. What is the vision?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you're exactly right. That is the one thing that you need to be setting, you need to be guarding, and you need to be reinforcing throughout your team. Something I'm curious about when you're building out the sales team as the seller, how do you create the environment where as the team, not only sales team, but the entire team knows that you are about to sell? How do you create an environment where that team is incentivized or at least would want to stay? Otherwise, there could be a diminishment of value. Walk me
That is
through that, how that dynamic.
okay. Well, often the team does not know the company's for sale the majority of the time. That's
Okay.
first. You want to mitigate, it's not your team's place to understand whether or not you're divesting of your largest asset. And I feel
Right.
like it creates risk and uncertainty for the team if they do know ahead of time. Now, in larger corporations, they will allow a buyer to speak to the team. And often that seller says, I'm staying on for 2 to 3 years. And so if they're staying on in the transition, I think that's one way to mitigate it. I think another way to mitigate it is that the seller negotiates that the sales comp for the team is still going to be the same. So if they do
Mhm.
find out that it's for sale, they at least feel secure. And
Yeah.
again, we don't ever recommend for sellers to share that the business is for sale unless they have deep management team. And it's clear that in order to grow further, they have to join a bigger platform. So if somebody does mention this, I always say if a team member asks if the business is for sale, always say yes. The business is always for sale. If you give me the right price right now,
Exactly.
I will 100% sell right now. So it's always for sale. And I think an owner can always say, we would sell if we could join a bigger platform that gives our team more opportunity or provides better systems. So if that
Yeah.
ever comes along, it's always an option. And I would stay too, because I've got to transition the business. Now, where sellers do have a challenge is if they wait too long to sell. There's a business owner
Mm.
I'm working with now. He's 72. He had a down year the past couple of years, right? But he's 72. And it's hard to sell a company on a down year, especially when you have 2 years of down year consistently. And I said,
Yeah.
to show that it's going to be good, you've got to get back out there and hustle. Like if you're telling me, oh, it's super easy. If somebody just, would cold call a couple places, they could build this. I said, I need you to do that for 30 days and show me the results. Just 30 days.
Yeah.
Because if I can show, like, you could say, hey, I'm tired. I'm 72. I don't feel like doing this anymore. But
Of
Jackie asked me
confusion.
to show that I could get out there and beat the bushes and how easy it was to get business. And I just haven't been doing it. And here's my data.
Yeah.
I can work with that. But if you just give me the words like, oh, somebody else could build this, and you had your highest and best year in 2023, and now we're in 2026, it's not going to be good. And you've owned that company
Yeah.
for 40 years, and your highest and best year was in 2023, which was really just kind of delayed COVID orders, if you look at it that way. So you have to really get in the mindset of what is the direction and what is possible. And if you wait too long, it's not good. Business owners should be looking at this in their late 50s, early 60s, so that they could stay on and properly transition the business for at least 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. Making sure they're looking out on the rise and go, where do we stand now? It's like in 2, 3 years, do I still want to be doing this? And if that's the case, they probably should be thinking about it now. Now,
Yeah, one of my owners stayed on as a salesperson for 3 years and loved it and was late
yeah,
60s because they weren't really exactly ready to retire, but they wanted to be able to go away for 4 weeks at a
still be
time.
a
And
part of it.
the new owner's like, oh, as a salesperson, you could 100% do that. And they said, great. And so they would go on 4 week trips.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they went away like 12 weeks a year, but they'd sell and they were the best salesperson.
Now, what has been like the hairiest situation that you've walked into when you've got someone that wants to list their business and they've got grandiose ideas of what their valuation should be, but they have like zero systems. Their sales team is chaotic. and that type of thing. What is there a scenario that comes to mind that you've encountered walking into that type of business?
There was a scenario this year. I didn't take the
Okay.
business to market.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't feel like they took care of their team in a lot of ways. They were complaining that their team wasn't good, but they were paying like $17 an hour for metal work. It was very low, very low. And the conditions of the facility were horrific. No windows, no air conditioning. No air conditioning is fine, but there has to be airflow and there has to be 2 huge doors open, right? There has to be like a good break area. That all has to exist.
Yeah.
It is Florida.
Yeah.
So people will work in that, but no airflow. And then he said that he had the opportunity to air condition it, but decided not to because he just didn't feel like it. So I felt like, oh my gosh, this team, he's complaining about how terrible this team is. How could I consciously transition this business to a new owner when I know they're being underpaid, their work conditions are terrible? This isn't like 1895. Like, this could be so much better for them. And then they have no investment in their facility, no investment in developing their team. There was a company I sold, and the one of the team had terrible teeth, and they paid to get all of the teeth redone for their team person. And he had that same situation. He was complaining that one of the workers' teeth are so bad and so rotted out from really just being poor as a kid. Okay, that was the not their fault, right? And he wouldn't do anything about it, but he had just bought new everything and new truck and new airboat and all this stuff. And I was like, he does not invest in his team. It's not a deal that I would want to represent consciously, and I wouldn't want to take it to market, and I'd be embarrassed if it were in my portfolio.
That's a great example of what we talk a lot about in terms of finding alignment. You know, in this case, it's finding alignment between this seller and whether or not you felt good enough to represent them and take it to market. What is it, just from a tactical perspective, what was your way of telling them, you know what, we're not a good fit? How did you, how'd you make that break?
Well, it comes across in the numbers, right? So let's say the business is making $750 of profit, right? Plenty of profit.
Yep.
But when somebody buys a business, there's something called a J curve. And the J curve is the business goes down a bit and then before it goes up again, right? Because there's things that you have to fix, remedy, improve. There's always that transition issue, right? And I explained that in the J curve, I felt that that would take minimum $250,000 minimum to fix, right? So now we're at 500, and then a buyer needs debt service. He's not paying himself a salary, but he's working full time. Then they have to reduce that, right? And then and ultimately their profit after would be maybe a couple 100,000, maybe. And I wasn't even sure if it would be that, because I worried that, because then I felt like they needed to move the business. And so it's not that the business had no value. It's just that the investment required for this to be a profitable investment for somebody else was greater than the opportunity of the ability to purchase it. And it's interesting because I did mention this on X, and I had buyers say, I want to know about this business. But when I put up a great quality business, they're like, oh, well, it's too expensive. I don't want that. And this was not a diamond in the rough. It was not a diamond in the rough. It was just the rough. It was just the coal. It was just the field of coal. It wasn't the diamond. And that's what I try to explain to people. So that's what you're looking at with mitigating risk. And that's why, they talk about the silver tsunami, all these businesses that will come to market. I think that many of these businesses will be unsellable.
Yeah. Oh, you're so right there. And what I just observed in your story is it sounds like you told him no without telling him no. You just presented him the facts, and then he made the decision to go, all right.
I said that, there needs to be investment in the facility. Like, that facility is really just not presentable, and you know that. And
Yeah.
And, there's trash on the property. The trash needs to be picked up. There's no reason for that. And I feel like a buyer will have too many objections to what's there. And then I felt like their minimum job that they would take was too low, and they felt that they would lose customers. Right? But I feel like they
Yeah.
would gain profit. And so so I shared real actionable items. I really liked them. I really liked the
Yeah.
business. It was hard for me to say no, but I remember coming back to the office and just saying to myself, you cannot take that under any circumstances, as much as you'd like to. And then that seller also in his 70s and in great shape, I have to say. Like I said, would you consider like selling skincare cream for your next stint in retirement? Because I think it would go well. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. The one of the things that I see, we do a lot of work on the franchise end, working with emerging franchise brands where you have new owners coming in, and roughly 80+% of these new owners have had zero sales experience, right? They come from healthcare, they come from tech,
Yes.
they're project managers, they're whatever the case might be, but they've had zero professionalized sales experience. I know you work primarily with sellers, but do you ever come across buyers that are coming in with certain expectations of what they can do with this company, but have zero sales experience and then experience struggle once they get into it?
It's fascinating that you mentioned this about buyers' expectations.
Yes.
I had a buyer recently refer to me, and this buyer who's never owned a company, never started a company, never had to invest any of his own money, doesn't have his own money to invest, so he has to raise money. He's expecting to get a primo off the market deal that's never been seen by anybody, and that the seller of all people would want him to buy it. It's super unrealistic, right? They want recurring revenue, established experience, but they don't have that, right? I'm not saying it's impossible for them to win the deal, but yes, buyers' expectations of what they can do and what they have. The seller also wants somebody with experience, with money, and the capacity to run their team. Right. So there's a two-way street that's going on. And actually, I just thought of a referral for you now that you were mentioning, because it's a new franchise that I'm working with. So I'll be sending that to you after. And I think that they could use some sales training on their team. But I think it's a really awesome team, and they're doing phenomenally well.
Love it.
The buyers need to be prepared to buy the company and compete against buyers who have bought multiple companies, private equity, independent sponsors, corporate refugees, like leave and think that, they can just do this because they worked a job. And that's not always the case. Sometimes they're fabulous and truly amazing business owners. But I think buyers have to be realistic with what their skill set is and why why a seller would want to choose them. I equate it to somebody who is a 5 on the dating scale wanting to date a 10. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that there's factors that would need to happen to make that possible.
If appearance is a 5, you need other factors that will take you up to that 10.
You need other factors. I
know them exactly.
That's 5 things that they can date. Cindy Crawford, and it's interesting.
You brought up something I had not thought of until just now, in that the buyers are actually sellers of themselves in order to get these deals.
They have to sell themselves to get the deal. So, for example, I dealt with a business recently that is in the trades that, and I'm not sure what their sales function is. I'm going to write that down for another referral for you, because that's somebody that you should know. So, the buyer had a corporate background. However, the corporate background used to interface with this company and knew all of the same customers. And then he left and started a similar adjacent company. So had background in running an adjacent business. And when we got on a call, that business had 5 full price offers. One of them was all cash, and the person faxed over their bank, or like scanned over their bank statement with the offer showing that all of the money's in the bank, no loan needed. And my buyer won the deal, even though he needed financing, because he knew all the same people. They had mutual contacts. He understood the function of the business, and he lived 17 minutes from the business. That was huge. So he lived near the business. He wasn't moving. He could really walk in and acquire, and the business was in great shape, so you could get financing, but he won the deal. It was super easy for him to win the deal and beat out the other people. The all cash offer was somebody buying it for their kid. Now, I don't think that was the problem. I think the problem was the kid was not the one doing the deal. The kid was 30. He is very much old enough to do the deal, go out and buy the company and say, my dad is funding this. And my dad has owned multiple companies. And we knew the dad. Like, we knew the dad well. We had worked with him in selling companies. He's an investor on other cap tables. So standing apart, as a buyer is huge. And sellers want to choose somebody who's going to care for the team the way they've cared for the team.
That is a powerful differentiating point. They, as a buyer, so often, if you look at it in the vacuum, you look at it as a purely financial transaction with, can we make this successful once we take it over? What many, if I'm hearing you correctly, what many often miscalculate or don't understand is that they have to have the interests of the seller in mind. They have to understand what is motivating the seller. And in this instance, what's motivating the seller to be willing to sell is to ensure that whoever's taking the reins is actually going to take care of the team, which is in both parties' interest, right? You've built a team that's produced a certain level of value. You would like to keep that team intact for the most part. So understanding their interest, which sales 101, you know it, I know it. Everybody here knows that, but often you don't think about it when you are the buyer.
When you sell a company, you have to think about the transition. At some point, you're going to have to introduce the new owner. How's that transition going to go? And it's possible that the new owner just is a financial buyer and does not have the skill set, which is okay, and doesn't know anything about the company. He can introduce himself that way and say, I'm a financial buyer. I bought this in order to grow, help you work less and make more, right? That's what he shares with the staff. I'm here to learn. I'm here to understand how to better serve you in making sure that your systems work better so you can do your job to the best of your ability, right? That's how you do that transition with somebody who doesn't have technical skills. But when you do have technical skills, you can say, I do have this background and I'm learning how we do it here at such and such company. The buyer for that previous company, the way he did it was, hey, just think of me as the same as Bob. It's just that I'm 2 inches shorter and 10 years younger, right? And everybody laughed, right? And then he gave his background and said, I'm here to learn and grow, and I want to hear from you, and get to know each of you. And he took every employee out to lunch. There were 15 of them. Every employee, he's like, I'm going to schedule lunch. It's just going to be random. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have lunch so I can get to know each of you individually and you can get to know me individually. And there's a transition period. Yeah. And it's funny, that story, that seller really chose the person who would take care of his team the best, not who knew the most, not who had the most connections, not who had the most money, but something where he built and his legacy really is cared for. Because sometimes people remember the legacy and sometimes they don't. He wanted it for him. It was for him and only him. And that's what was meaningful.
I love that. Now, I want to double click on a few things on your background and your business, because we have met a couple times for coffee. We've met on Zooms and things like that. But there are things I've been curious about, just asking about your business. But before I do, anything that we haven't talked about today that you think would be important for owners or potential buyers and sellers to be thinking about relative to building sales teams and systems, or even other things that have been top of mind for you?
I think in the words of Charlie Munger, I have nothing else to add.
Awesome. We have covered all the bases there. Now, here's where I want you to add. This is what I've been curious about. You started in business brokerage young, in your 20s. Like, it's like none of us would go to college and go, "Hey, I want to be a business broker." What led you into that business? So you're a UF grad. What did you study there? And then tell me about your journey from UF to first you were working with somebody, if I understand correctly, and then you launched out on your own with your brother, correct? As a business partner?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So walk me through that journey from UF to how you got started.
I'm going to start earlier because I want people to think about what they liked as a kid.
Yeah.
As a kid, I loved business. As a kid, I was fascinated by the inner workings. Yes, I wanted to own Bob's Barricades. Bob's Barricades, if you're still out there, I love you. And I still want to own that company, even though it's owned by a huge company. But I always wanted to own Bob's Barricades.
I called on them when I sold trucks.
Did you? I just loved them. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know who Bob is. I should look it up.
You see them everywhere.
As a kid, yes. When I found out that there was a company as a kid that made fork, spoon, and knives, I just went nuts. I'm like, you mean there's a separate company that makes plates? I just loved it. And to me, I see everything in the eyes of business. It's just fun. Yeah. Like, business is fun. Business is healing. All my friends own companies. Like, literally all my friends own companies. And so when I had the opportunity to become a business broker, I was 22. I answered an ad in a paper. He was really hiring anybody with a pulse who was lucid and probably not a criminal. And so he hired me. Now, I was enthusiastic and young and, probably reasonably intelligent enough. And he said, over there are a bunch of books and VHS tapes, because this is 1998 and you can watch all of them. And I did. I watched everything, but apparently he told me 6 months later, I was the only person who had ever done that. And I just was a forever student. I'm still a forever student. I'm still a forever student. So I worked there, and he sold the company, and that's why he was hiring, because he was just trying to get some critical mass to sell the company. And I happened to be part of that. Then I worked at that next company for a few years. And then in 2004, when I was 26, it was time. Like, it just was very clear. And my brother was getting his master's at UF. And so he's like, I'll join you. So a few months later, he joined me, and we've been working together since 2004. Like, it's a 22-year partnership, which is pretty amazing. We get along really well. Sometimes on the weekends, we meet up at this one lake that's in between our house, and we walk to our other brother's house and hang out for coffee. Like, we enjoy hanging out with each other, and enjoy working with each other. So, we have a lot of complementary talents, and complementary skill sets. There's, I think that's what makes the partnership successful, is we're not the same. We don't always have the same opinion. We don't always have the same outlook. And we've invested in different things. We've invested in similar things. That's how I got started. But I was always just a fan of business. And I'm always coming up with ideas for my clients. I'm always cross-pollinating ideas across industries. Like, hey, have you thought about this? And, without revealing anything confidential, I'll say, there was this one roofing company I sold where the seller would pencil out the gross profit margin for each job and then pay the sales rep based on that gross profit margin if he was within range. That was how it was calculated. And I'll ask them, are you doing gross profit for every single job? Do you know the jobs that are profitable versus not profitable? Because that's important to know also. If your salesperson is selling an unprofitable job, how is that helping anybody? So it was always just like fun for me. And that's why I've sold, hundreds and hundreds of companies. It's well over 400 at this point. Not stopping, in my 28th year, I'm having a record year, probably, towards 100 million in sales. And,
Yeah.
maybe more. There's still some other larger stuff that could, close by the end of the year. So we just really just keep, working and growing and doing bigger and bigger deals typically. We do have a
Yeah.
team here at the office that assists us on the back end, but really when they ask for me, they get me. I like to run a bespoke process.
Yeah. In something that I've noticed about you is you've become very well known, not only in our community, but we met on X in the SMB community on X is fantastic, just super supportive, just a great bunch of folks. And having originally interacted with you there, that's how I got to know you at first. And then we connected and so forth. But what I'm curious about is what has been your sales strategy when you were starting launching the business, starting from ground zero to where you are now? I imagine X has been a huge platform for you, speaking engagements and things like that. But walk us through what your sales process has been and how you've grown your business.
My sales process has mostly been networking. That's been me out and about because I like it.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like me cold calling, not fun. I don't enjoy it. But I'm good at networking and I enjoy it because I think people are really interesting. Like you and I have had some really interesting conversations and, just about life and philosophy and, how we view things just makes you think. So for me, that and speaking engagements, I happen to be good at that and I find it a little bit fun. I am naturally entertaining. I'm convinced that's a survival skill that I was born with, like to be entertaining for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I think that there's different skills that you're born with, and that might be one of them. I don't know how that helped with survival, but maybe I'm just friendly enough because I'm a small person. I need a place to like hide and get food. I don't know. So, I think that, that's been my strategy of what works for me. I don't feel like that's a strategy to have a huge company. The way that I grow beyond what I do is investing. So I do invest in small business deals. I do invest in funds. And then this is kind of, I would be considered the same professional as a well-known attorney or something like that, where you hire me for me and you get me. And I have a support staff. That's how I do it because that works for me well. Your business. And that allows me a lot of flexibility. I never intended on having a huge practice. I thought that if I ran a lean company where I could focus, that would be the right business for me. And that's proven the right business.
Yeah. And I love how you put it that you've chosen an avenue for how you build your business, primarily through networking, and go, you know what, this is what fits me for what I want to build my business for or to be. And everybody out there, that's the way to think about it. When you're thinking about sales and building sales systems, you choose things that can fit who you are. And if you want to scale that business, now you start implementing and adding on systems in order to help you scale it, or you want to grow it as to a certain size, you choose what that mechanism is. And I love what you demonstrate out there when you're networking. You network in person, you network online, and you're basically the same person either way. And it's been great just getting to know you ever since we connected. So, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today and spending some time with us.
Thank you, Sean. I loved it. It's always fun to see you. And we need to have the pistachio lattes soon as well.
Mama Napoli's in Winter Park.
Yes, it's awesome.
Great stuff.
Shout out to them.
Jackie. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. I'll talk to you